Hello, it's the Great Canadian Bagel here, coming to you today with the next episode in the U.S. presidential election prediction series. There's, like always, tons of new polls going everywhere. Actually, it's going in a distinct trend, and I think you'll see this. I'm probably going to get a bunch of comments like I always do. And, I mean, feel free to comment on it. I'm not saying don't do it, but I know at this point what the comments are going to be like. And it's kind of funny, actually. I mean, comment away. I like reading them. Show me what you think. But we're going to start how we always think. Say how we always do. Starting with the Democrat safe seats. So we get Hawaii, California, New York, Vermont, and Massachusetts. Moving into Republican safe seats, we have Idaho, Utah, Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska at large, 1st and 3rd, Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, and West Virginia. So I think right away we can already see it is getting closer. What is safe for each party is getting roughly the same number of seats now. We move into the likely column. We get Washington, Illinois, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and Maryland. Maryland, I will note here, is very, very close to being safe. I think it just got flipped went down to likely just by random fluctuation with polling. I'm pretty sure it's going to probably back up into safe next week. The polling trends aren't suggesting Trump is going to get that strong of a win in the most likely scenario. I will also note here I did forget DC for Democrat safe. If DC is not Democrat safe, then the Democrat Party has really lost they've lost really hard. DC stops being a safe seat for them. But moving on to Republican likely, we have Alaska, Montana, Missouri, Texas, Ohio, North Carolina, and South Carolina. Now, Maine's second, and I did forget Maine's first as likely for Democrats. So, really no surprises with the likelies. North Carolina being a likely instead of Georgia is, again, one of those polling weirdnesses. I think we're going to see in the election North Carolina is a lot tighter than Georgia is, but my model's only as good as the data I'm putting into it, so for now we're seeing North Carolina slightly more safe. I just don't, given historical trends, I just don't see North Carolina being as safe for the Trump as Georgia will be. But yeah, that's what the numbers say right now. Maybe they're right. Or maybe this is exactly right, and this isn't just a fluctuation that happens. Moving to Democrat lean. Oregon, Colorado, New Mexico, Delaware, New Jersey, and Maine at large. Really, there's not much surprise here. New Jersey and Delaware have been moving around a bunch last week and a half, but they're they're firmly in the lean to likely column. It just depends on the day. Sometimes they're likely, sometimes they're lean. Depends on what the most recent poll was. So that's where it is. And we'll see in a second when I go over the Excel graphs why I try to do this week by week, and because to try to smooth out fluctuations. But here's what we're going for now. Moving to Republican lean, we have Arizona, Nevada, Nebraska that's second, Iowa, Wisconsin, Florida, Georgia, Pennsylvania, and New Hampshire. Moving into Democrat tilt, we have Virginia, and Republican tilt, we have Minnesota and Michigan. Minnesota and Michigan are really tight, but they seem to be trending in the same direction. Or they trend together. those two. So I think who ends up winning one of them is going to win both. So if you see on November 3rd that Biden wins Michigan, he's almost certainly going to win Minnesota, or vice versa. And if Trump wins, he's almost certainly to win Minnesota. Michigan is the tighter one, so for Trump that is. So if it's split, I would assume it'd be split Michigan for Trump, Minnesota for Biden, but they are very close together, and I suspect they'll both vote the same way this election. There's some interesting things that have popped up recently, like New Hampshire and Nevada have flipped over. Flipped over to Trump, and that's because recent polling, first off, has actually narrowed in those two states specifically, but also the general popular vote numbers there's been a couple polls that have been very favorable to Trump once I do my turnout and demographic corrections to actually match what I'm expecting the turnout to be, like the voting, who's the distribution of voters on election day, or in the election, because I guess there's mail-in ballots, so it's not all going to be people voting in person on November 3rd, but and there's early voting too. But once I do my correction, there's been a couple polls that have put Trump quite far ahead, and I don't believe them. It's kind of the opposite way. Normally people don't believe polls because they're putting Biden so far ahead, but there's been a couple polls that once I do my model's corrections to them, I think the result is disproportionately favorable to Trump, but that's what it is. If I'm wrong with the model, I'll have to refine it, but there's no sense in changing it right now because I don't have a date to change it against, but we will see. Moving into the best and worst case scenarios, these have not really moved much. If we look at best case scenario for Trump here, really the only movement is New Mexico's kind of wavering back and forth between Biden and Trump. Oregon, Delaware, New Jersey are waving back and forth between lean and likely, or tilt and lean. There's really not much movement in this map, so I'm not really going to talk much more about it. Moving to Biden's best case scenario, there is some movement here depending on the week. Or sorry, not the week, the day in the week and when the most recent poll was. 2 days ago, Biden was winning comfortably in his best case scenario, and now, as of today, his best case scenario, he's winning less comfortably, and we will see why, I think, in a second, why that's happening. But in this scenario, Biden ekes out barely, but it's entirely possible that Trump could win even on this scenario, just because the Pennsylvania and Arizona are very close. Florida's also very close, so Biden could win a pretty sizable win here. Perfectly plausible, but these are the best and worst case scenarios here. So moving into just aggregate polling data, or the model. So here's what I mean, what I've been trying to smooth out things. So around here between 12th and 13th, Biden had a weirdly large bump, like a very significant bump that tapered off really quickly. But then we see a couple days later, Trump gets a gigantic bump because there was no polls for like 3 days, and there was one poll that was super favorable for Trump, and it skewed the model upwards. And then it tapered back down to about here, and then we got a couple polls that were very favorable to Trump, and I think disproportionately favorable. But again, that there is a recency bias in my polling aggregate model. So if the most recent poll is very, very favorable, it will lead that way, but it will weight the poll upwards. And I do try to, as a full editorial disclaimer, I do my best to try to take polls that would skew the model in these ways out of the categorization. and don't include them. Or if I do include them, I like to include them ones and there was a poll last week where there was one day where there's one poll that was super favorable for Trump, one that was super favorable for Biden, and instead of ignoring both of them, I included both of them. So sometimes I do that. I do my best. Sometimes, I can't ignore every single poll, and I can't editorialize every poll, or else I'm just forcing the results. But I do try to weed out some of the really weirdly favorable ones once I do my model's corrections to them. But that's what we have. Really no change to this graph here. Trump's still strong upward trajectory. Biden's still flat, which I don't think anyone should be surprised about. I don't see why anyone would suspect Biden is gaining people, has any room to gain supporters. He's been hovering around 49-50% for most of the election, or most of the race. And once you're hitting 49, you're hovering between 48 and 50. There's really not a lot of room to grow. Obama got 53% in his first term, but I think that's definitely an anomaly. I don't think you should expect a generic Democrat like Biden to get 53% vote margin on election day, even against someone like Trump. That's an extraordinary election with a very charismatic politician, and Biden's not either of those things. He's kind of a generic, and he's not very charismatic. So I think we are seeing observably that he has an upper limit around 50-ish. In the polling, my model puts that down to about 49-ish as his upper limit. If I think we see here, 49.6 was the highest I've had him over the course of the model. So, yeah, we'll see where it goes. I will note, though, even with this here, there is a lot of overlap here. So if we look here, the confidence interval for Biden is plus or minus 4.3. And for Trump, it's plus or minus 2.28. So it is perfectly possible that even though my model has Trump up 1.9, Biden could be leading. Or, conversely, Trump could be leading by a lot. Instead of just 1.9, he could be leading by 4 or something like that. And actually, if we... the best case scenario for him is him leading by, a lot. He leads by a lot in the best case. I think it works out to be almost like a 9-point lead or something like that. But so that's the update for today. It's pretty typical to what it has been. I wouldn't expect it really to change until the debates happen. The debates might cause movement in either direction. Even though I just talked about how I think Biden has an upper limit around 49-50, maybe if he does really well in the debates, he could push past that. Or, conversely, if he does really terrible, it could lower that ceiling for him. And he really does need to hit that ceiling. If he doesn't saturate his 49-50, Biden lost the election. He needs to get 49-50. And if he's not at that, he's lost. Trump, meanwhile, doesn't actually need to get that saturated. I don't even really know what the upper limit for Trump is, because the polling is just wild. And he's on an upward trajectory, too. Even if you take the raw polling numbers, just the unaggregated numbers, the numbers that have not been adjusted by my model, he's on an upward trajectory, so I don't really know what his upper limit would be. Presumably around what it was, presumably more than what it was in 2016, but that's just me speculating. I don't really have anything to say on that. But if you liked the video, please like, subscribe, share the video, comment below, yell at me for having a model that says Trump's gonna win if you don't like that, and if you like the fact that it says Trump's going to win, I mean, by all means, applaud in the comments. I'm not doing this. I'm doing this as an exercise to predict the election, not to be biased one way or the other. So, have a good day.